Okay, gewaltig. So we are on Daf. Leave Kufim Testament Aleph. We're up to Boilahu. So yesterday we discussed different lashonis of what would be good for a Mata Shivra, like Yitoil, Yiske, Yachsik, and Yichne. We said that Yehenna is a suffix and Yira is a suffix, and Yamoid, the Yishan, those are all sveikas. We also had a discussion of if someone gave all of his nechasim to one person, and then he took some of those nechasim and gave them to a second person, is he chayzer in the entire matana that he gave the first person, or is he only chayzer in that he wants to divert to the second person? And the Gemara fears us the maskana that it's a chazara b'kula. Once you're chayzer b'miktzas, you're chayzer b'kula. Okay. The Gemara also had a shaila. If someone gave all of his nechasim to Hekesh or to a niyim, would that also have
Yosy, can you do anything to fix your internet?
halacha of these cases?
Yosy, can you do anything to
I
fix
didn't
the
realize
internet?
that my internet wasn't good.
Your internet is
What's happening with it?
it's unintelligible.
Yes. What?
You're freezing and breaking up. It's just I can't hear a single thing you're saying. And you stopped. And you're hello.
Can you hear me?
Barely. Yes. I think so. Are you hotspotting off your phone?
I'm changing it to my own phone.
Oh.
I'm going to do that now.
Okay.
Because the internet here, I guess, is not good. Can you hear me, or is it still bad?
That's better, but your video is very choppy.
How about now?
It's a little better.
I just connected to my hotspot.
You're it's no, it's unintelligible. All right, I'm gonna pick up and come to shul, I guess.
Still? I'm on my hotspot now.
Well, maybe. Well, you're a little better.
What?
Maybe you should turn off your camera. Let me see if that improves things.
Did that help anything?
Your audio is still very choppy.
It's still bad? Still not good?
Oh, that's right now. It sounds a little better. Okay, we'll give it a shot.
Okay, so let's hope this will work. Let us hope that this will work. Okay. Zog the Heilige Gemara. Oh, so I was just discussing, I forgot what I was discussing before. I was just discussing in the earlier cases where we have a suffix, if the maton is kaim or if the maton is not kaim, if he was choizer or kula or not. So who is the muksuk? What do we do in this suffix? The man dies, who does it go to? Who do the nechasim go to? There's actually a chalokis rishonim of who the muksuk is. There are those who learn that the muksuk is the estate, and therefore it doesn't go to the recipient. But there are those who learn that the muksuk is the person who he first gave the matana to, and the suffix is on the chazara. So maybe the muksuk would be the original recipient. So there's actually a machlokes rishonim about who the muksuk is. Okay, so let's get started with today's Gemara, the fourth line from the top on Kuf Mem Testament Al. Yibayalahu. What would happen? Mochar Kol Nechasav. He didn't give them all away. He sold them. He sold all of his nechasim, and he's a shchiv merah. And the typical svara would be is that he only sold everything is because he didn't think he would need it anymore. Mochar Kol Nechasav now. That's a very important question. It's a very important question. So Amar Rav Yudah Marav, Im Amad Einoi Chayzer, even if he survives and he recovers, the sale is valid. It's not revocable. But sometimes he would say otherwise. He would say Amad Chayzer. But V'loi Pligi, his two piskei halacha are not contradictory. If he sold the property and he kept the cash and he has the cash in his bag over here, then it has one halacha. But if he liquidated all that money and he paid with the money his chayv and he no longer has money, that would be a different halacha. So there's actually a machlokes for shonim when it would be chayzer and when not. So the Rashbam's approach is as follows. The Rashbam's approach is how the Isnu be'inayu, the Rashbam right at the top, he says, then it's chayzer. If he has the cash with him, he's chayzer. You know why? He actually purposely held on to the money so that just in case he would survive, which means he knew there was a possibility he would survive, he would be able to return the money and get his property back. But if it's parina b'chayve, if the money that he got, he paid off his chayves with, so he has no intention of ever recovering that property because he's using it to pay off his chayves, then im amad einay chayzer. I'm sorry? Because he doesn't need it anymore. Because it's easier. It's easier for your children to split up cash than to split up buildings. You can ask children who had buildings. They often people sell them so that they can give all their children a lump sum of cash. And there's no arguments, and then everyone could reinvest that cash the way they would want to. But there are some Rishonim who actually learn the opposite. That if it's Istu Beinayu, then it's Einay Chayzer, because he wants to hold on to it, and if he paid it off in his chayv, then we would say that he does get it, that he doesn't get it back. I didn't see the Rishonim inside, but I know there are Rishonim who learn the opposite way. This is a very, very fascinating chiddush in halacha. We know that this property does not belong to this person. It belongs to the shchivra. And the shchivra says, you know what? I'm moided that this is your property. So he's being moided to something that we know is not true. And that's what Rashbam learns. He said when he was sick, Sada umas halalu shafloniing. This field or this bag of coins that I have belongs to Reuven. V'afalpi shehayinu muchzakim v'nechasam halalu she'einin shalosh ploni. We know they don't belong to Reuven. We know they belong to the shchivra. But he's being moida that he owes it to somebody. Shehayinu yoidim shein shel zeh hamoida behen. We know it belongs to the person who's being moided that it belongs to a third party. It belongs to the shchivra. We know it doesn't belong to Reuven. But he was moided. Does not impact the kinyan. Mi amrinon shehu omer came shaloi lahaspias bada. Maybe the reason why he's saying it, that this property, this money belongs to Reuven, is because he doesn't want people thinking that his son's just yarshened billions of dollars. So he wants to make it look like they really, all the nechasim that seem to be theirs are not really theirs. His idea creates an actual violence. And whoever he's moided to, if he's moided to Reuven, that this property belongs to Reuven, in fact, that it belongs to Reuven. So this is called, it's like a kinyan haidah. It's a new way of transferring funds. So Tashma, the Isser Giyara, Isser was a ger. Before we go weiter, this kinyan haidah is a very, very serious thing, because there's actually shaylas la'alocha if it works, look at other things. And there's some tragic stories that happen throughout our generations that are impacted by this kinyan odah. In the days of the Chavis Das, there was a woman that was on her deathbed, and let's say she was married to Reuben all her life, and she says, "I want you to know that I'm an Eshishish. I was really married to Shimon before I was married to Reuben, and I never received a get." Or she said that she was Mizana. She was Mizana. And then she recovered. So now that she recovered, the shaila was, is she allowed to continue living with her husband Reuven? Because on her deathbed, she said that she was really Mizana, or she was an Eshishish before she married him. And the Chavis Das seems to answer her because a Haidah before Misa is that there's another monastery. And it caused a big problem. In the days of the Chassam Sofer, there was an even more fascinating case where there was a shoichet that was on his deathbed. And the shoichet on his deathbed said that, first of all, in my youth, I didn't behave so properly. I was Mazana. And with Goyim, he said, and then he said, in addition to that, I often would shecht with my chalif, even though it was not properly gestelt, even though it had pegimis, meaning many of my shchitas were nevelas. And the Chasam writes in the Chuvim brackets, obviously he only got paid for the kosher animals, because otherwise, why would he care to tell anybody? Chasam Sofer asked him, why Taka did you do that? So he said, because of money. I wanted to get paid, and I knew I wouldn't get paid. I wonder if the Chasam Sofer was like sort of hinting how that's not a good way to pay shoichtim based on how many kosher animals they produce, because it could incentivize lying. So there was a whole shiloh now, the whole city. Are there kelim mutter? Do they have to throw out all their meat? It became a big shiloh. The Chasam Sofer paskin that he has an amonis. He has an amonis. Someone right before his death is not going to die. The Chasam Sofer refers to the Chavis Das and says that this is called Haidah Kodem Misa, and there's an amonis. So Haidah has a very powerful force. So here we had a shaila, could he transfer with Haidah? Now, if you notice, the Tosfos has different pshatim in what the shaila might be. But the Rashbam learns that for sure Haidah works. The whole question is, do we believe him that he's being murdered, or maybe he's just trying to make it look that like there's less nechasim being transferred to his children, so his children shouldn't be perceived as being uber wealthy. But if we know that that's not the case, that's not what he's trying to do, we would surely say the Haidah works. So Zogt Gemara Tashma, the Isser Giyara, Isser was a Gera. He himself was a very fascinating story. Havala Tracer Alpha Zuze Beirav. He had 13,000 zuz in the household of Rava. Who is this Isser Giyara? So the Rashbam tells us some interesting stories about him. Who is the Giyara? Shaba al Rachel Bas Mar Shmuel Kodim Sheniskaya. We know that some of the daughters of Shmuel were captives, and Rachel was one of the daughters of Shmuel who was captured, and Isser was one of the captors, and he lived with her while he was still a guy. Eventually, I guess Yiddish guy grew on him, and he became a ger, became a Talmud Chacham. So therefore, when his Abrahimenu Begayus, while he was still a goy, Rachel, the daughter of Shmuel, became pregnant. And who did they give birth to? What was the name of this child? As Rav Mori Baruch. So Mori Baruch was referred to by his mother, not by his father, because his father was not Jewish. But before Rav Mori was born, Isser already became Jewish. So when Rav Mori was conceived, Isser was not Jewish. But by the time Rav Mori was born, Isser was Jewish. Meaning, Rav Mori Baruch, his conception was when his father was a guy. But when he was born, his father was a Yid. This is one of the daughters of Shmuel who was captured. Tosfos asks, how could this possibly be one of the daughters of Shmuel that was captured, the Gemara in Ksuba says that they had a migoi. Since we only know that they were captured by their own word, therefore they're nemon to say that they were not violated. So, this can't be that same. This cannot be the same daughters that we're talking about. It can't be Shmuel's daughters, because we know from the sugya over there that they were nemenes, that they were not violated. I'm sorry. Oh, so some of the Rishonim say there were more than the daughters. There were two daughters who were not violated, and those two daughters are the daughters that the Gemara and Kshubas are talking about, where they said they told us they were captured, and they said that they were not violated. But a third daughter, in fact, was violated. That's how some learn to explain the Rashbam. The Tosfos argues this is a completely different person. But whatever the case is, we have here a ger, and he's not going to be moirish to Murray, because a ger is not moirish to his children. And when Murray was conceived, Isser was still a guy. So he had a lot of money, cash, sitting as a pikadon in Rava's household. And he needed to find some way to transfer that money to his son. He wants his son to have it, of course, but his son's not going to get it, because through Yerusha he won't get it, because it's not really his son, because during the conception, Rav Mori was not, Rav Mori's father, Isha, was a ger, was a goy. So what happened was, Hayrasai, Shaloi B'Kedusha, V'Ladas B'Kedusha, Ubei Ravhab, and he was by Rav's household. There's a shiloh why the Gemara needs to tell us where Rav Mori was at the time. There's one reason is because he wasn't there, otherwise there might have been other kinyonim that the father could have used. The other reason was, since he's a Bei Rav, since he's learning in yeshiva, the Isser Yura wanted to make sure he would have money, he would have funds to survive after he would die. So Rava, he wanted to be able to hold on to the funds and keep them, because we all know that a ger who dies, the first person that's zoichin is nechasim, gets to keep them, and Rava wanted to keep them. So Amar Rava, Heichi nikninu Rav Mori lahanizuse. How will we be able to? Rava wanted to know, how would Rav Mori be able to be koine dizuzim? Now he's looking to prevent Rav Mori from being koine because he wants to keep the money. Iba Yerusha, if you're going to suggest that he yarshins from his father, lav bar Yerusha, he can't yarshin from his father because his father isn't really his father, because when his father conceived him, his father was a guy. Even matnas, even matana, if it's because the ger will give his son a matana as a matna shchivmera kirusha shaviyu rabbanim. A matna shchivmera only works b'toyras Yerusha, and therefore kalecha de isa b'Yerusha isa b'matana, kalecha de lesa b'Yerusha lesa b'matana. If this ger Isser Geyira, he couldn't be Meirish anything because he's a ger, and a ger can't be Meirish, he cannot give a matna shchivmera. So it's not a discussion of the recipient, it's a discussion of the donor. If the donor cannot be Meirish, the donor cannot give a matna shchivmera. So let's try again. Even Meshicha, if he would have Rab Mori make a Meshicha, less Nugabe. Sai, the cash is not by Isser, it's by Rava. And Sai Rav Mori is away in Yeshiva by Rav. Iba Chalipin, if you want to suggest they should make a Chalipin, Ein Makbaya Nikna Chalipin. The pekun that Rava had was cash. You can't be coin of cash with Kinya Chalipin. And the Yag of Karka, and if it's through Karka, so by being Makna, Rav Mori Karka, he'll be coin of the Metalton along with it, which would work less Le'ara. It happens to be Isser Geyira has no land. So there is no way, Rava said, for Mori Baruchel to be koina this money. And even Mamet Shloshtan, if you're going to use the key of Mamet Shloshtan, which we discussed, that if the giver, the recipient, and the nifkad is there, and I tell the nifkad, don't give my watch back to me, give it to him, that's a kinyan. The problem is, Dr. Rava, Ishalachli lo yazilna. If Isser calls me because he wants to do a Mamet Shloshtan, I will refuse to go, because I don't want to help facilitate that Mori Baruchel should get it, because I want to keep it. So that's what Rava said. So Maskif law, Rav Ika Bareder of Ami. I have a simple answer for Isser Giyara to transfer this money to a son. Veloidi Isser, the Halan Zuzi, they have Marin in it. Let him just be Moida. We said Kinyan Adal works, and therefore Velikninu Biaidisa, and therefore Avmar could be kind of with Isser being Moida, and now Mari will get it. Adahachi Nafach Aidisa Mi Beisser. Since everybody was talking about it, Isser heard that now he has a solution, and of course he took full advantage of the solution. He was moided that the money belonged to his son Mori, and now Mori got the money. Ikbid Rava was upset. You swindled me out of my money. Omar, inchi, you taught Isser Giyura a way to send it to a son. Umafsadili, and now I lost out because I would have had it otherwise. So this is a real eyebrow raiser, like Rava was trying to hoodwink Rav Mori Barachal, a yeshiva man, out of money that pashas he was entitled to. So the Chazoin Ish, many people stelzach on it. The Chazoin Ish comments on it and says Rava held that this money should go to the tzibur. There were kahalish needs, and he held it should go there. So of course Rava wasn't taking it for himself. Rava was going to use it for a tzibur, but it still is a little bit uncomfortable. I want to just remind the Olam that about 3 or 4 days ago, we had a story with Reb Safra, who lost his father. He was an adult, and he had younger brothers who were Yosy Mamluch, and he went and invested money from the estate, and he wanted to keep all of the profits to himself, and his younger brothers took up Shittim Torah to Rava, the same Rava, and Rava said, Reb Safra gets to keep all the money, because there's no way, normally, the Mishnah says, if you specifically say, I am being Isaac in business, and I don't want to share the profits with you, you don't have to share the profits. But if you do it stama, you have to share the profits. And Rava said, Reb Safra, since he was a man who sits and learns, he doesn't have time to be busy doing chesed. If he was working, even without declaring it, he was for sure only doing it for himself. Remember that psak? There was also a little bit of an uncomfortable psak. So we have the same Rava that's shared with us another uncomfortable psak. So I saw another pshat in the Rishonim, but I want to just give you a hakdama to the pshat of the Rishonim, so it'll be more palpable, or not palpable, palatable. It'll be easier to absorb. So I don't know if the other remembers, there was a Yid he used to live in Toronto. His name was Zalman Leib Waldman. Does the other remember Zalman Leib Waldman? Zalman Leib Waldman was a fellow who was wanted by the U.S. authorities for many, many years, and he managed to evade U.S. authorities because whenever he would come in, which is actually again now a little bit, whenever he would want to come home to these states, he always flew from overseas through Toronto because the Canada-U.S. border was very weakly guarded, and it was much easier for him to get through the border from Toronto to the U.S. rather than from anywhere overseas to the U.S. And one day they caught him. They caught him going into the U.S., and he ran back into Canada. And now the U.S. wanted to have him extradited because they had a warrant out for his arrest for many, many years. So the first thing they had was, the first hearing that they had for him was whether or not he should remain in custody. He was arrested by the Canadians. He wasn't arrested by the U.S. because he ran away from the U.S. Customs in Pearson, and the Canadian Customs caught him, and they were going to charge him for coming in to Canada on a false passport. And then they were going to be discussing sending him, extraditing to the U.S. He ended up fighting extradition for over 7 years, maybe even more, maybe it was 10 years, but eventually he was extradited. And that's a story in and of itself. Today he's already finished his sentence in the U.S., and today he lives happily ever after in Eretz Yisrael. But anyway, I was by that first hearing. I was asked, they wanted for me to go to the first hearing, and the hearing was merely about, would he remain in custody, or will they release him on bail until they have this discussion? So it was unbelievable. So his taina was, even though I was sentenced to prison 7 years ago or 5 years ago, I was never evading. I was never evading capture. I happened to have been in Heathrow Airport the day that I had to surrender, and I actually was about to board a plane. You could see the records. I had a ticket, and in the airport, mysteriously, I suffered a heart attack, and I wasn't able to come. And therefore, I was recovering from my heart attack for the past 5 years, And now, you know why I'm here? I'm on my way to surrender myself. That was his argument. And it was Eddie Greenspan, the famous criminal lawyer who was representing him. So the prosecutor, not the prosecutor, the people from the US who wanted him said, I don't understand. If the reason why you came here is to surrender, we're here, we're happy to take you. So surrender. What's stopping you? And I remember Eddie Greenspan was caught off guard. Like, what do you answer to that? Here you're telling me that that's why you came to surrender. So we're here. We'll take you with open arms. So the defendant calls over a motions to Eddie Greenspan to walk over with him. And when Eddie Greenspan walks over and he leans down, and the defendant tells him something, and he says, my defendant does not want to come to the United States in shackles. He's going to come with honor. He's going to come voluntarily. So he's going to fight this, and after he fights this and wins, then he'll come voluntarily. That's what the argument was, and they bought it. So why am I telling you this story? Because some of the Rishonim say that Avada Rava had full intention of giving the entire money to Rav Mori Baruch, and Tosfos has a whole discussion about mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes. Rava wanted to be l'kayim divrei emes, but the problem is if Rav Mori Baruch would own it legally, then Rava wouldn't be able to hand it over and be mekayim the mitzvah of mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes. So Rava wanted to own the money legally, and then he would have turned it over to Rav Mori Baruch because of mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes. Because he's upset that you found a way for him to be kind, and now it's not mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes. Now it's his money. So that's why I prefaced it with that story, because sometimes about that I'm going to give it over. But I want to give it over b'toras mitzvah l'kayim divrei emes, not b'toras that Mori owned it. Okay, Gevalta. Zok to Gemara on Daf Kuf Mertachim Azeis. Shtayer Karka Kolshu. We learned in the Mishnah that a Shrimera who doesn't give everything away, he leaves over a little bit for himself, Matanot HaKiyemes, because that indicates that he wasn't only giving it away because he was dying, because you see a little piece of property he retained for himself. How big is a kolshu that would be enough to say that he's willing to give away the rest of the property even if he recovers? Amar B'Yudol Rav, karka k'dei parnasos, enough karka that he could live off. It's pretty vague what k'dei parnasoso is, but in most cases, the Olam says that k'dei parnasoso is enough for a year. And there was actually a shaila in Eretz Yisrael where there was a very wealthy man who was helping somebody move to Eretz Yisrael. And the person that was moving to Eretz Yisrael, he promised, when you come to Eretz Yisrael, don't worry about parnasa, I'm going to take care of you. And the person moved to Eretz Yisrael, and now the father died. And the children knew that their father made a commitment, but they didn't know how far the commitment went. So they went to a Rav, I don't remember who the Rav was, it was one of the Gedolei Adar, and he asked, what is, in order for us to fulfill 100% our father's commitment to support this family, what do we have to give them? So the psak that they got was that Kavdei Parnasa means for a year. If your father said he was going to finance them, it means he was going to support them for a year. Okay, Zok to Gemara Vayter.
Yosy, does the same thing apply to married children?
Usually, by married children, they are much more specific in their request for commitments. It doesn't necessarily have to be land. It could even be metaltal. If he had cash in the bank, that would also validate the matana even if he recovers. So we're saying basically that kolshu is lavdavka means kedei parnasosai, and karka is lavdavka, it means even metaltal. How beautiful and accurate and clear the halacha of our elders are. Karka taimamai. What's up is dafka karka kolshu. The ika isamachle. If this person survives and recovers, he'll still have what to survive off. So therefore, what he gave away will be a good matana. Well, guess what? Metaltli nami ika isamachelu. Even if he only left over for himself metaltlin, that would also be enough for him to sustain himself. So therefore, it's a beautiful thing that our elders told us, referring to Rabbi Yirmiyah Ba'aba, it's a beautiful thing that they told us that it even applies to Metalton because it's logical. Frag the Gemara, Matzke Fla Rabbi Yosef. Umay Kamanta. What are you telling me that it's logical? It's not good at all. Man Amar Metalton, Kakatnan. Don't tell me that it's so beautiful it means Metalton as well, because that's not what our Mishnah says. Our Mishnah is Karka. Karka means Karka. And Man Amar Kadei Parnasosoi, and the Mandamar who said that the amount of assets that have to be left over in order for the Matan to be Mekayim has to be enough to support him for a certain amount of time, that's not what the Mishnah says. So don't say it's so beautiful what they said. It's actually contradicting the words of the Mishnah. Omar le Abaye, so Abaye asked Rabbi Yosef, I don't understand. The Tani Karka Dafko, you're asking me a big kasha that the Sabi are not so good because they're saying even Metaltlin and our Mishnah is Karka. Abaye said, who said that whenever it says Karka in the Mishnah, it means Dafka Karka? Maybe it just means assets. And I'll prove it to you that sometimes when the Mishnah says Karka, it doesn't necessarily mean Karka. Because what now we learned, HaKoysev called Nechosav La'avdai. Someone wrote a Shtar Matana to his Evet Knani, that he's koine whatever his Evet is koine. He wrote a Shtar Matana to his Evet, I'm giving you everything I owe, which means he's also giving the Evet himself. And therefore, Yotze ben Chayr, the Evet becomes a free man, because part of what is included in this gift is also the Evet himself. But Shire Kaka Kolshu, if he retained a little bit of Kaka for himself, Lo Yotze ben Chayr, he doesn't go free. And we're going to soon learn that means not only Kaka, even Shire Metaltlin Kolshu, Lo Yotze ben Chayr. And Reb Shimon Omer, Lo Oilamu ben Chayr, even if he was Shire Kaka Kolshu, or Metalton Kolshu, we'll say that that's not referring to the Evet. And therefore, the Evet won't go, the Evet will go free, because he was not Meshire that. Ad sheyoymar kol nuchasayin nesunin leploni avi chutz me'echad meribo shebehem. An undefined small portion I'm retaining for myself, only there would we say that he's trying to retain the Evet, and therefore it wouldn't work. The Omar, Rav Dimi, Bar Yosef, Omar Rabbi Lazar, Asu Metaltlin Shir, H11. The halacha is that if you were Meshire Metaltlin, we'll also say that you might mean to be Meshire your Evet, because you might consider your Evet Metaltlin. Asu Metaltlin Shir, Eitzel Ksuba. However, if someone gives his wife Metaltlin, it won't impact the Ksuba. So, Frekta Abaye to Rabbi Yosef, how could you tell me that whenever the Mishnah says Karka, it means Karka Dafka, and therefore you're asking a kasha on Hanesabi, Karka doesn't necessarily mean Karka Dafka. Let's have a look at their Rashbam over here. HaKoysev Nechosav La'avdav Yotze ben Chayr. Shareya Evet B'chlal Nechosav. If he's giving all of his Nechosim to his Evet is also one of the Nechosim that he's gifting to his Evet. V'nimtza Shehikna la'eved as Gufboy, he was mocked into the Eved's own self, im Shar Nechosim, together with all the other assets that this person has. But Shire Kaka Kolshu, Kohen Sha'amar, puts me Kaka Kolshu. He said, I'm giving you, Mr. Eved, everything I own, except for a small piece of Kaka. So then Lo Yotze ben Chayrin. You know why? Because maybe the Kaka Kolshu that he's retaining for himself is the Eved. Eved is not Kaka. But your Evet hukish lekarkois. We know the Torah, for certain halachic reasons, considers an Evet karkois. Dichsiv is nachaltem, which is a lotion that's used for karkois. The high karka kolshu ikala meimar shal Evet. When he said, "I'm retaining for myself a karka kolshu," he might mean you is what I want to keep for myself. Which, of course, then would say there's no matan at all. V'nimtza she'ene ben chayrin. If I'm retaining the Evet for myself, then the Evet is not a ben chayrin, and therefore by default or by definition, the gama nechosim loikana. Once the Evet is not koine himself, he can't be koine any other of my nechosim because mashakana Evet kana bail. V'hu adin zok Rashbam im amar chutz mi metalton kolshu. The Gemara is going to say in just a moment that even if you said chutz mi metalton, even though the Mishnah says chutz mi karka kolshu, we know that means chutz metalton. So this is where Rabbi Yosef is this is where Abaya is proving that even though the Brisa used the lotion of karka kolshu, it means metalton kolshu as well. Who adin im omar chutz mi metalton kolshu k'demafarish Rabbi Lozer lakamei, like we saw just a moment ago on Omar Aleph, also metalton shear it's 11. If you say I'm retaining it for myself some metalton, we also could say that you might be referring to the Eved when you're retaining for yourself a little bit of metalton. The Dilma Hay Eved who metalton sheshire. Maybe the Eved is the metalton that he was referring to that he wanted to retain for himself. The Avd metalton, because an Eved is mobile. He might halachically be a karka, but the fact is he is mobile, so he could be metalton as well. Aval Mamar kol nechasayin sunum lach. What if I told the Eved, I'm giving you all my nechasim except for this specific field? Then there's no concern. Then I read Ben Chayrin, Eved ain't bechlal oishasad the shapirish. The what he's retaining for himself is a piece of property that's defined. If it's undefined, we say maybe it's the Eved that he's referring to. But if it's defined, it's a non-issue. Rabbi Shimon says no, even a regular piece of property wouldn't be an issue. Rabbi Shimon Aimer lo oilamu ben Chayrin, even the Mishayar Karka Kol Shahu, we won't say that means the Eved. The Shire Karka below Eved. We'll say he meant the Karka, not the Eved. Ad Shiyah Hashir to Shire Sosam, unless the owner purposely cloaks the identity of what nechasim he wants to retain for himself. I'm giving all of my assets to this Eved except for 1/10,000th of my nechasim. So that's very sosum. That's why he might have been referring to the Eved in that comment. Shahi Echad Meriboy could be a Eved Koi, and therefore ve'enim mishuch. V'derech kovid kosav la'avdai kach. He didn't want to say chutz from my Eved. He said chutz ve'echad Meriboy. It's a subtle way of referring to the Eved. We call makam loy kanaklum. Okay, we'll stop here. So right now we're in the middle of a sugya, and the sugya is when the Mishnah uses the word karka, could it also mean metaltlin, which is what Hanisabi wanted to say, that by retaining for yourself some metaltlin, it's enough that the matana should be valid even if the choila recovers, or not, or maybe the Mishnah when it says karka means dafka karka, and we're in the middle of bringing a raya that karka is lav dafka karka, it means metaltlin as well. Okay, we'll stop here.